Chair and Ranking Member, and welcome to the committee, Undersecretary Torres Small. It's so great to have you here. I want to also thank you for visiting Minnesota. It sounds like, based from my colleagues, you've been all over the place. We had a great day looking at rural housing issues, rural healthcare issues. We visited a small dairy, and it was a great trip, and it really underscores, I think, the importance of rural development programs in small towns and rural places and also tribal communities. And so I want to dive into that a little bit. I've also had lots of listening sessions on the Farm Bill, including a couple that have focused specifically on rural development. And the overriding message is that we need to figure out how to make opportunities more accessible to people in rural development, and we need to figure out how to modernize rural development programs so that they're easier for folks to access. So let's start with the question of more accessibility. Minnesota has a very diverse farming community. Hmong, Native, Latino, Black farmers and businesses, they all play a big role in our rural economy. As we draft the next Farm Bill, can you talk to us about what we need to do to help make sure that farmers of color, business owners of color, and tribal communities have access to all USDA programs?
In our listening sessions, what we hear, one of the biggest challenges is the match requirement. And I'm sure you're hearing that from your communities as well. So in Reconnect, what was initially done was we eliminated the match requirement for tribal entities.
Yes.
And then in the bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress expanded that to eliminate match requirement for colonias, for counties of persistent poverty. So I think that's an example of working to make things more accessible for communities.
I just might add also in the Inflation Reduction Act on the energy provisions, we also eliminated match requirements for rural communities, tribal governments, and that will be really helpful. But please continue.
And in REAP 2, also increasing the amount that we're able to fund. So that's certainly always helpful. Sometimes, too, a set-aside can be helpful, recognizing that especially as we reduce the barriers for application, we'll have more people applying. So if we want to make sure a certain amount of it goes to persistent poverty counties, for example, a set-aside can be helpful to ensure that the competition is within that group and that a certain amount goes to that group.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with all of that, and I think we also have heard, and I know that you speak to this, that a lot of rural development programs struggle because their technology platforms are so outmoded and outdated that they literally barely function anymore, and it makes it very difficult for folks to access those programs because you were describing this earlier. Oftentimes, colleagues figuring out how to fund technology is not really the thing that we love to do, but if it isn't working, then literally it's a barrier to access for all sorts of folks. So,
when I think about modernizing rural development, it's about how do we make sure that people have a rural development they deserve. If you go to a bank, you don't have to fill out a paper form. Why do rural development customers have to do that? It's about equity. It's about if you're in a rural community, you should still have the tools, modern day tools to do this work. So I really appreciate your interest in it and happy to continue to.
Well, and it also really hampers your capacity to report back on results and progress because you literally are looking at piles and piles and piles of paper. So you can't do the analysis to figure out, okay, what's working here? How do we make it work better? So I think that's something for us all to consider as we think about this. I want to just touch also on rural housing. I know that every one of my colleagues on this committee has been hearing about how there is a severe shortage of housing, workforce housing, and particularly affordable housing in rural communities. And this, of course, though the rural housing service programs aren't under the umbrella of the Farm Bill, they relate directly to the work that you are doing, that we will be doing in the Farm Bill around rural development. I appreciate Senator Brown foreshadowing the work that we have been doing over in banking housing on the rural housing service. I'm really grateful to Senator Rounds, who's been such a great partner, and we are working on putting together a proposal. Grateful, very grateful to you and your staff for being such good partners with us as we put together what I hope will be a bill to really think about how to modernize the rural housing service so that it deals with some of the issues that we've been talking about here today, making it work better. And this is particularly, as you said, because so many of the rural housing affordable mortgages are expiring, and that means that we're actually looking at things getting worse rather than getting better. So could you just maybe briefly talk about, I'd love to hear your thoughts about what we can continue to work on together to improve the rural housing service and how that relates to our work on the Farm Bill.
Thank you so much for your work on it. We're happy to work with you to continue to do that. One of the challenges with the housing part of our portfolio is that it's not in the Farm Bill, so it doesn't get regular updates to stay modern the way that the rest of our programs can.
Well, so I'll look forward to working with that on that with all of you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and thank you for your leadership on housing issues. So, Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you as well, Undersecretary Torres Small. Thank you very much for the great